Hi, Enolia.
Hello, how are you?
Oh my gosh, it's so good to be with you again.
Yes, it is. It is. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank
And I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce you.
you.
So, I'm Enolia, and this is Chaz Wesley. And Chaz is a coach, a speaker, a writer. He is a grief expert, a and inspirational speaker, and a global influencer. And Chaz, we know that your specialty is, and we would call him a midwife to the dying and the bereaved, because his specialty is helping people cross over. So, Chaz, just say a little bit about what you do.
Thank you so much for having me again. It's always good to be with you. And you've spoken it right into its place. I have been doing this work for about, I want to say almost 30 years. That's hard to believe. And I do exactly that. I've been what's called a midwife to the dying and bereaved for a couple of decades now. And I have lost count of how many people I have sat with who have done that crossing over. And what an honor and privilege it is to be in those places. And I think today we're going to kind of talk about something different, but there is no different. And we both know that. Every new moment is the death of the last and the birth of the next. So here we are.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we earlier talked about what it is that would inspire people and motivate people to really be able to give them something that is going on in their life now. And we talked about the entrepreneurial movement. And I call it a movement because whether you are an entrepreneur already or whether the happening of the pandemic that took place forced you into an entrepreneurial mindset because you had to be creative. You had to figure something out. You had to maintain those streams of income. And it's interesting because just like working for a corporate or working for an institution, entrepreneurship isn't necessarily for everyone, but you might find yourself dabbling in it. Or if it is for you and you're working within it and it's working well for you, you know, let's talk about what works, what doesn't. And one of the things that I find as people endeavor to work, whether it's in corporate entrepreneurship or institutions or whatever the case is that you need to have a very strong foundation. A foundation that affords and allows you the opportunity to, let's say, dare to make good decisions, trust yourself, all of those personal development pieces and aspects that you might not necessarily think about in your life has to be strong. And so, what we would like to discuss is that foundation that needs to take place as you dare to build something very strong and very powerful. You need to have a strong and powerful foundation. What are your thoughts?
I love this conversation. I happen to be building something right now in my backyard, and I it's just a little raised garden, raised bed for a garden, and it amazes me at how many steps go into the foundation of this thing that we see. I had to buy sand and I had to buy a special kind of plastic paper to put over it. But because I don't like plastic, I had to go find something that was more eco-friendly. And then there were different layers, and all of that I've been working on will never be seen again to the outside world. But the blossoms of the plants that I plant inside of that will be, and those will be shared. But it's that foundational piece that's so important. And you don't go into entrepreneurship, you and I know this very well, with anything other than a really strong foundation because unfortunately you won't last in entrepreneurship without it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, for those people who might find themselves not growing, for those people who find themselves, um, unable to move through the story of different scenarios and circumstances that just keep coming at you and you feel like you're getting bombarded, we need to reflect on how strong of a foundation that you have. And so I'm going to throw this at you and then I'm going to also answer it myself. But what would you term as the building blocks of that strong foundation? Because you're exactly right. You're right on point when you said that these are the things that are unseen, not necessarily visual. And, we think that we can hide behind the facade, right? And we think we can get away with the imposter syndrome because a lot of people have this saying, "Oh, just fake it until you make it." But guess what? It doesn't work.
Not for
Because you
very
think
long.
you're faking it and you think that you can make it, but everyone knows that you don't know what you're talking about.
Right, right. That's right. Well, to answer your question, the first thing that comes up for me is a sense of trust. And it's not a trust outside of me. It's not trusting in someone or some system outside of me, but it's trusting my own knowledge, my own wisdom, my own compassion, whatever that is, that self confidence has to be one of the major building blocks of entrepreneurship for me.
Absolutely. And to add to that, I would say valuing yourself.
Self worth.
You know, People go, "Oh, I want to be a millionaire," right? But if you don't have the millionaire mindset, if you don't have the assertiveness, the walk that says this person attracts others because they know themselves well, they're assertive in terms of what they project, they've done their homework on their knowledge, and they present themselves with that strength within them. And you don't see not necessarily the things that are all obvious, like the conversation, the expertise, and everything, but it's that way that they carry themselves. It's that they value themselves, so therefore, it's just automatically assumed that you'll value what they have to say too. And whether you do or not, they carry themselves that way. And valuing yourself and understanding what you bring to the table, the value that you bring to the table, the worth that you bring to the table in your own mind is the most important piece.
I think there's also a sense of responsibility that we carry with us. And into entrepreneurship, that might be I'm responsible now for, bringing home the bacon, so to speak, for a family. And that's a scary place to be if you've been in the corporate world and your paycheck was kind of guaranteed every 2 weeks. And then you step into this. But I want to talk about responsibility a little different than that because it's not a burden as we think of in our vernacular a responsibility is. Rather, it's a response to the ability that I bring.
Mm-hmm.
And so understanding that a lot of times we are reacting rather than responding. And in entrepreneurship, you do that for a week and you're out of business. Like you got to take the reaction out of it and learn to respond differently than you ever have because it's personal. And as much as we think about don't take things personal, we take this personal because it's entrepreneurship, it's bread and butter, it's who I am, it's what I'm doing. But you don't have to take it from a reactionary stance, but a response from that place of wisdom and growth and potential.
Yes, and then it's also key that you always hold your power and not give it away.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So, what do I mean by holding your power? And I think of many, many circumstances and scenarios when you're doing well and people have observed that you're doing well, the first thing they want to do is come and compliment you and say, "Oh, what you did was so great. It was so fantastic. Oh my gosh, you had my interest, you had my focus, you had everything." But the one thing I would really do is I would really do A. And I would also add B. And you go, okay, well, thank you for that. Now, those built on a strong foundation would take the recommendation of A and B, and they would say, that's a point of information. They would look at it, digest it, and just go, okay, point taken, noted, but, I don't really see it, and that's one data point, and I'm not getting that consistent data points, and that's not consistent feedback. But that person that doesn't trust themselves, that person that goes, oh my gosh, I'm missing A and B. I got to add A and B. I got to add A and B, and I got to hurry up and do it because that person said that A and B is missing. And then the next person comes along and they say, you didn't add C and D. And the next person comes along and says, you didn't add E and F. And now you're running around going, I got to add A, B, C, D, E, and F.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is that when someone projects, and I say this, when someone projects a judgment or a perception onto you, don't automatically make it your truth.
Right.
Step back, understand that's a data point. You're not getting that consistent feedback. Put it in appropriate scenario of, okay, that's a point taken, but no, I don't have to act on that. That may not be conducive to me. That may not be where I want to take the direction of my business. That may be great feedback from someone I value, but again, in perspective, it's just feedback. You collect data. You don't change everything on one data point.
I think it's also important to know as you're collecting that data, what you're doing with it, where you're storing it. I will share this with you. This is a personal story. Along with being a grief counselor and death doula, I'm also an interfaith ordained minister. And so I travel and speak and preach at lots of different faith communities all over the United States. And for years, every time I would get out of the pulpit, invariably somebody would meet me at the back door and say, if only you had said this, if only you have done that. And I would go home from that thinking of nothing else but that one thing that person said. That it wasn't really even criticism. It was, I wish you would have done it different. Right? And I would go home for the next week, I would think of nothing else. So I collected the data, but I stored it right here in the top level consciousness rather than taking it, as you said, but place it where it really belongs. I mean, in all of my attention to that one person and that one thing that was said, I missed all the emails and the text messages and the Facebook messages that came in and said, your talk changed my life, or your talk was the most brilliant talk ever, or whatever those things were. Missed all of that because I was focused on that one thing because I brought it to my awareness. So knowing what to do with what comes at you is another form of response, if you will. I'm going to respond by placing it where it needs to be, not where it's not going to serve me.
Yeah, and I'm sitting here listening to your story, and why do we do that as human beings?
I don't know. I had it happen yesterday.
The whole thing is like, we do this. We do this as human beings. We take one data point that tells us where we were wrong versus the plethora of information that tells us how we did it right.
Yeah.
And we focus and zero in on what was wrong, then embrace what was right. And it's interesting because not only do we do that, we're also a human race of having to repeat things over and over and over again before we hear it.
Yeah.
Not even just listen to it. Yeah, I mean, you're hearing what has to happen, but you're not embracing it. You're not receiving it. You're not embodying it.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at all of these particulars of building a strong foundation, and we understand that, these things have to be in place, I want our audience to really understand the importance of this, because when you don't do that, it's like building a house on a foundation that is not solid. And then what happens is that that house sinks to one side. And then the house sinks maybe to the other side, or the fact that the house is sinking at all. Because the strength by which that foundation needs to be built on needs to be solid. Because the world is not always kind. And in as much as how we choose to approach the world, we still have to deal with the confrontations, the parts that are not kind, the things that will challenge us and test us.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to move through those stories. And those stories can either consume us, they can drown us, because we can drown in the story, be stuck in the story and drown and just not know how to get out, which ends up doing what? Which ends up basically saying we have to start all over again because we didn't succeed. Or you just don't succeed and you have to pick yourself up again. And in order to pick yourself up again, you have to have that strong foundation. Some of the most successful people will tell their stories of how, if there was an author, they were turned down 200 times. If it was a millionaires, they'll talk about how they came up with 10 different ideas that were told, please get out of my studio, and kicked out. And on the brink of bankruptcy. You know, one story that comes in mind, which is the spray for the bathroom. What is her name? She does the poo spray.
Mm-hmm.
And she tells her story about how she tried to come up with 10, 15 different ideas and was just like laughed at and laughed out. And it was that little spray that she persisted on that ended up being the success.
Wow.
So it is the stamina and the way you pick yourself up.
Yeah.
And not necessarily how you failed.
You know, vulnerability comes into everything that we do when we allow it. And if you've read one page of Brene Brown, you understand vulnerability is not our weakness, but it's one of our strengths.
Mm-hmm.
And when we can play with vulnerability and the courage and the trust or even the faith that it takes to step out in entrepreneurship, I think part of our ego always says, you can't do that. You shouldn't do that. You're not worthy of it. Don't claim it without your ticket. We also think, I might get it wrong. I might fail at this. I might make a mistake. But the thing is, we never get penalized for any of that. So plan on it. Like, plan to make a mistake. Plan to fail. I make a to-do list every day, as I'm sure most of every business person does in some way. And I cannot tell you how many, there are more days when I don't complete the to-do list than there are those that I do. That doesn't mean it's not going to get done. It just means I prioritized it. Some things might have to move till tomorrow. Maybe I didn't get that call back that's going to solidify that piece. There is no failure in any of that. When we look at it from that broader perspective, just as you said, every famous person that you can think of has had those, no, you can't do this, no, you shouldn't do this, you should do it different, whatever that is. But there's not a downside, there's not a wrong way. And so we have to keep that thought and that belief going, because we often talk about the spirit of entrepreneurs. Well, you walked into this with a spirit, and you have to maintain and nurture that spirit, just like a spiritual practice. It's not that you're going to lose it completely, but trust me, you will lose it day in and day out because things come at you all the time. So you have to nurture and maintain that spirit of entrepreneurship. And those are the building blocks that we're talking about. Those are the core values that everyone needs.
And belief is everything. You're absolutely right. If you don't believe in yourself, then you shouldn't even be in the game.
Right.
It's just a must. There is no compromising it. There isn't anything that really replaces the fact that if you don't believe in yourself and you don't trust yourself, that you're going to be successful. Because, you know, when you fail, and I don't say if, because we all fail. We all make a poor decision. We all go through some circumstance that is adverse, and we have to pick ourselves up.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe and trust yourself anymore, then you've actually taken away that opportunity for that second chance, and you might as well just stay down. You have to brush yourself off. You have to pick yourself up. And then you have to believe in yourself to no end. It reminds me of listening to, what actor was it? Jim Carrey, who said that he was living out of his car in front of a gas station, and he would pull out his wallet and look at this $1 million fake money that he had. And there he was, homeless, living in a car, when he got his calling card to come back and to perform and to perform and to perform. And he took off right at the precipice of his low instead of his high. Believing in oneself is everything.
And it is that mind shift from, I think I can, I might, I should, I want to, but the mind shift is, when are you going to say, I will and I am?
Absolutely.
Because all of those other words and phrases, like I could, I might, I can, I want to, but those phrases are almost creative, but they're not. They entertain a possibility, but they don't move that possibility into full expression. And so you have to really, as you said, take your power and not let it go. And that's your I will and your I am. And then you have a mission and you are driven by that. You have a vision and you are inspired by that. And as the other things come, let them. They are going to come, but know where to put it, know how to respond to it. And the only way we can fully express a possibility, of which there is an infinite supply, is with our I will.
Absolutely. So this has been a wonderful conversation. We're not going to keep this one long, because sometimes we go for hours and hours and hours, and there are things that we both have to do. But I'm just so grateful to meet you here, Chaz. And, we shared this conversation because both of us contribute to the world by helping people build their personal development and create that strong foundation so that they can be entrepreneurs, so that they can be the best version of themselves, so they can do it with strength and courageousness and the love of self and the understanding of value, and to know that they will be successful. And so, Chaz, how do people reach you?
My website, chazwesley.com, and I hope that people will join me there. I have a free online class that's starting, by the way, and it's on my website, and it's all about Mother's Day, of all things. But as we talked about, I'm a grief counselor, and Mother's Day is a hard day, as you can imagine, when you don't have a mother or that mother figure in your life anymore. And it's interesting, I'm bringing that up because I just had 3 signups. They're all entrepreneurs. And the reason I know that is because they said to me in their note, in their registration, I'm so glad you're doing this on a weekend because I'm working crazy hours. And my biggest cheerleader is no longer here, my mother.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful,
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
And people can meet me at enolia.live. And I work as a coach, and I have my master class that you can sign up for. And at this time, I will be having a series of classes scheduled for next month in May that'll come out on my events calendar and my newsletter. So just sign up and please check out what we're doing. And my book, which is Enolia, How I Found My Sovereign Voice with My Grandmother Elder, and also the Discover Your Own Sovereign Voice journal and workbook are both available on Amazon.com. So please check out our work. Know that we're here. Know that we want to see you successful in all that you do. And would you give any last tips, Jazz?
As we end this, I just want to say again that when you take your power in your I will, you can create worlds and universes that you have never imagined. And you and I are living proof of that. We're sitting in our own kingdom, if you will, creating every day that monarchy of thoughts and beliefs and what we want to do. And if we would let that spirit that drove us to this place continue to guide us, then I think that's the best advice I could give.
I concur. I concur. I think you said it well, and I think that I'm just going to leave it at that.
Good to see you, Enolia.
So great to see you. Thank you, and thank you, Chaz. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we appreciate you.
Yes.